Laura held her son Daniel tightly as the apartment shook with the force of the slammed door. Her scream echoed through the empty hallway, raw with fear and anger. Jason shouted, "You'll regret this, Laura," before vanishing into the night, his face twisted with betrayal. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, their cry mingling with Laura's racing heartbeat. She whispered to Daniel, "I promise you're safe with me," though her trembling voice betrayed her doubt. The night pressed in on her, the weight of a life forever altered pressing down. Memories of endless sacrifices collided with the bitter taste of betrayal. Her thoughts spun wildly, torn between terror and resolve. As Daniel buried his face against her chest, she felt a silent vow ignite. She would endure whatever came next, no matter the cost. The silence after Jason's departure was heavy, but in it, a fire began to burn within Laura's soul. The apartment was still, the silence broken only by Daniel's shaky breaths as he tried to steady himself in Laura's arms. Laura whispered, "You're safe, my love," though her eyes darted to the door as if expecting Jason's return. Her mind replayed the chaos of the last hour, the fury on Jason's face, the sound of the door slamming, the sharp sting of betrayal. She tried to gather strength, rocking Daniel gently while the clock ticked relentlessly on the wall. Each tick felt like a reminder of how fragile everything had become. Her life, already bruised by struggle, now threatened to collapse entirely. She pressed her lips to Daniel's forehead, silently vowing to shield him. Shadows deepened around them, but within the dim light, Laura felt a spark of resilience begin to stir. Laura rose to her feet with Daniel, still clinging tightly. She carried him to the small bedroom where comfort could replace fear. "Sleep now, Daniel," she whispered, smoothing his hair as his eyes fluttered with exhaustion. His innocence pulled at her heart, the weight of responsibility pressing harder than ever. Every sacrifice she had made echoed in that moment, every night of loneliness, every double shift, every tear shed in silence. Jason's betrayal was not just against her, but against the child who deserved better. The room smelled faintly of lavender, the soft sheets promising peace. Laura pulled the blanket over Daniel and sat beside him, watching as sleep claimed him. In his quiet breathing, she found fragile strength. She placed her hand on his chest, whispering softly, "We'll be okay." The weight of exhaustion pressed heavily on Laura as she leaned against the bedroom wall, her eyes fixed on Daniel's peaceful face. The silence of the night was deceptive, a thin veil over her storming thoughts. She thought of the looming custody battle, of Jason's anger, of the uncertainty clawing at her future. Yet, she knew she had to be strong. Her body trembled with fatigue, but her mind refused to rest. She whispered to herself, "You have to fight, Laura. For him." The night air drifted through the cracked window, carrying faint city sounds and a chill that seeped into her bones. She pulled the blanket tighter around Daniel, shielding him even in his dreams. Her heart ached, but beneath the ache lived a fierce fire. She would not surrender. Laura finally left the room, closing the door softly behind her. She stood in the darkened hallway, the silence pressing against her chest. The apartment bore scars of struggle, peeling wallpaper, scattered toys, unpaid bills piled on the table. She ran her fingers through her hair, whispering, "You'll be safe, Daniel. I promise." Her reflection in the cracked mirror startled her. Tired eyes, tear-streaked cheeks, yet a glimmer of determination refusing to fade. She walked into the kitchen, placing her palm on the cool counter, grounding herself. The faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, but within her, a storm brewed. She was alone, but she knew that from this night forward, surrender was no longer an option. Morning light filtered weakly through the curtains as Laura prepared Daniel for school. Her hands shook slightly as she tied his shoes, the silence between them heavy. Daniel asked softly, "Will Dad come back today?" Laura forced a smile, saying, "Not today, sweetheart, but I will be here always." Her voice cracked but carried determination. She watched him sling his small backpack over his shoulder, his eyes searching hers for reassurance. Laura felt the sting of betrayal echoing again, Jason's words haunting her resolve. The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt toast, the morning rhythm disrupted by turmoil. She clung to the ordinary moments, knowing they were fragile shields against chaos. As Daniel opened the door, Laura whispered, "You'll be safe, I promise," while her heart braced for battles yet to come. Laura rushed through the crowded office, clutching papers as whispers followed her. Her manager, Clark, eyed her coldly, saying, "You're late again, Laura." She lowered her gaze, muttering an apology while her heart sank. The betrayal of her friend Emma gnawed at her. Emma had revealed Laura's private struggles to others, adding weight to her shame. Laura thought bitterly, even friends can wound when you least expect it. She pushed through the day, her energy drained, every keystroke on her computer echoing her fragile state. The hum of office machines felt louder, suffocating. She forced herself to keep moving, each task an act of survival. She reminded herself quietly, "I can't lose this job. Daniel depends on me." After work, Laura sat with Emma at a small cafe, tension sharp between them. Emma stirred her coffee nervously and said, "I didn't mean to hurt you, Laura, it just slipped out." Laura's eyes hardened, whispering, "You knew how much I trusted you." The sound of clinking cups around them seemed distant as Laura fought to hold her composure. Betrayal stung deeper than she expected, because Emma had been her anchor through lonely nights. Daniel's face flashed in Laura's mind, reminding her of what mattered most. She stood slowly, placing money on the table, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "I can forgive many things, Emma, but not risking my child's safety." The cafe air grew heavy, the bond between them fractured beyond repair. Laura returned home exhausted, greeted by Daniel's eager hug. "Mom, I missed you," he said, his innocent smile lifting her spirit momentarily. She knelt down, kissing his forehead, whispering, "I missed you more, my love." The apartment was dimly lit, toys scattered across the floor, unpaid bills still resting on the counter. Her exhaustion threatened to consume her, yet Daniel's laughter brought a fragile sense of normalcy. Laura set dinner on the table. Simple pasta, the best she could manage. Daniel chattered about school, his joy untouched by the storm swirling around them. For a fleeting moment, Laura allowed herself to breathe. She thought, "No matter what I endure, Daniel's happiness must remain untouched." That night, Laura sat by the window, the city lights flickering outside like restless stars. Her reflection looked back at her, weary yet resolute. She whispered, "Jason can't break me, Emma can't undo me, I will rise for Daniel." The ticking clock echoed in the quiet room, reminding her that time was slipping through her fingers. She thought of the looming custody battle, of the whispers at work, of Emma's betrayal. The burden was heavy, but she felt something stir, a fierce determination sharpening within. She glanced at Daniel sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Laura pressed her hand against the cold glass, vowing silently that her child would never know the depth of her fear. Night pressed down on the small apartment as Laura sat at the kitchen table surrounded by unpaid bills. The numbers blurred before her eyes, each reminder of the fragile balance slipping away. She whispered, "How much more can I take?" Her body ached from exhaustion, her heart from betrayal. Jason's threats replayed in her mind like a broken record, words sharp enough to cut through silence. Daniel's laughter earlier still echoed faintly, the only light in her dark spiral. She pressed her palms against her temples, struggling to drown out the chaos. Outside, the hum of city life continued without mercy. Laura exhaled shakily, whispering, "You cannot fall apart, not now." Yet doubt crept in like shadows, wrapping around her resolve, daring her to surrender. At school pickup, Daniel ran into Laura's arms with joy, but his teacher Emily pulled her aside. Emily said gently, "Daniel seemed distracted today." Laura forced a smile, nodding as her chest tightened with guilt. She whispered, "Thank you. I'll talk to him," though her voice trembled. Daniel's small hand slipped into hers, trusting, innocent, unaware of the storm she carried. Laura thought bitterly, "Even my pain spills onto him." She walked home, Daniel chattering about crayons and friends, while Laura's silence grew heavier. She wanted to shield him from every wound, but cracks had already begun to show. Each step home reminded her of the thin line between strength and collapse. Her love for Daniel was fierce, but so was her fear of failing him. That evening, Laura met Clark at the office late, his voice sharp. Clark said, "If you can't manage your time, Laura, we'll need to reconsider your position." Her chest tightened, fear sparking inside her. She forced a reply, "I'm doing my best, Clark." His stare carried no sympathy, only judgment. She thought of rent, food, and Daniel's future hanging on this job. The walls of the office seemed to close in, fluorescent lights buzzing above like relentless critics. Laura left with papers clutched against her chest, the city night awaiting her like a cold embrace. The betrayal at work, the betrayal at home, both gnawed at her. She whispered to herself, "You can't lose this. Not now." But her voice sounded hollow against the silence. Back at home, Daniel drew pictures on the floor while Laura watched him silently. His crayons scattered across the rug, colors bright against the dull apartment walls. Daniel looked up, smiling. "Look, Mom, it's us." Laura smiled weakly, her heart both warmed and shattered. She whispered, "It's beautiful, Daniel," but tears blurred her vision. His innocent joy became a mirror of everything she fought for. Yet shadows lingered in her thoughts, Jason's voice a ghost whispering failure. Laura pulled Daniel into her lap, holding him longer than usual, as if to shield him from unseen forces. Her arms tightened, her love fierce, but her doubts fiercer. She thought, if love alone were enough, he would never know fear. Later that night, Laura stood on the apartment balcony, staring at the city skyline under heavy clouds. The wind whipped through her hair as doubt gnawed at her chest. She whispered, "Am I strong enough to keep him safe?" Her reflection in the sliding glass door showed exhaustion and fear, but also a faint glimmer of defiance. She thought of Emma's betrayal, Clark's coldness, Jason's threats, each wound carving deeper into her spirit. Yet Daniel's sleeping form inside gave her a fragile anchor. She pressed her hand against the glass, whispering softly, "I will not break." The storm above mirrored her storm within, but her eyes, tired as they were, carried sparks of resilience refusing to die. Laura sat across from Jason in a dim lawyer's office, tension sharp between them. Jason sneered, "You'll never keep Daniel from me." Laura clenched her fists under the table, whispering, "He deserves better than this." Papers lay scattered, filled with accusations crafted to break her spirit. The lawyer shuffled them with a practiced coldness, reminding Laura of the systems stacked against her. Her breath caught as she read words twisting her past into weapons. Jason smirked, feeding on her fear, his confidence unshaken. Laura forced herself to meet his gaze, silent fire burning beneath exhaustion. She thought fiercely, "You won't take him from me." The silence stretched, broken only by the scratching pen of the lawyer, sealing the beginning of war. That night, Laura opened a box hidden deep in her closet, hands trembling. Inside lay letters from her estranged mother, a past she had buried long ago. Tears blurred her eyes as she whispered, "I thought I left this behind." Daniel's small footsteps padded toward her, but she quickly closed the box, forcing a smile. "Bedtime, sweetheart," she said, her voice thin. As she tucked Daniel in, his innocent eyes searched hers for answers she could not give. The weight of secrets pressed heavier than Jason's threats, because they revealed cracks in her carefully built strength. She kissed Daniel's forehead, whispering promises she feared she could not keep. The night grew colder, shadows lengthening, as Laura's past clawed its way back into the present. The next day at the cafe, Emma approached Laura hesitantly. Emma said, "Jason asked me questions, Laura. I told him things." Laura's face paled, fury and grief colliding. "You betrayed me again, Emma," she whispered, voice shaking with restrained rage. Patrons around them sipped coffee, unaware of the fracture unfolding at the small table. Emma looked down, guilt etched in her expression, but the damage was done. Laura rose slowly, chair scraping loudly across the floor. Her hands trembled, but her voice steadied. You chose his side over mine. The cafe air seemed colder as Laura walked away, leaving Emma in silence. She felt her trust collapse further, her circle shrinking until only Daniel remained untouched. Laura sat in Judge Richard's courtroom, papers stacked like weapons beside Jason. Judge Richard said firmly, "Both parties will be heard." Laura's chest tightened as Jason's lawyer painted her as unstable, twisting her sacrifices into flaws. Jason smirked, his silence more cutting than words. Laura's palms sweated as she clutched Daniel's drawing hidden in her purse, the only anchor she carried. Her voice quivered when called to speak, but she steadied herself, whispering, "For Daniel." She stood tall, recounting nights of double shifts and years of care, her truth a fragile shield against Jason's lies. The courtroom air was heavy, judgment looming, but Laura's voice grew stronger with each word. She would not be erased. That evening, Laura sat alone on the floor of Daniel's room, clutching his favorite toy. She whispered, "They don't see who I am, but you do." The room was quiet, Daniel already asleep, his steady breathing soothing her chaos. Laura thought of her mother's letters, Emma's betrayal, Jason's relentless fight. Each wound cut deeper, yet each reminded her why she had to rise. She brushed her fingers across the toy, grounding herself in Daniel's innocence. The world might call her weak, but within these walls she was unbreakable. Laura leaned against the bed, tears falling silently, whispering, "For you, Daniel. Always." Shadows stretched long across the floor, but within her heart, a fragile flame refused to die. Laura opened the apartment door to find a familiar stranger standing there. It was her cousin Clark, long absent, carrying shadows of the past. Clark said quietly, "I heard about Jason, and I couldn't stay away." Laura froze, memories of abandonment flooding back. Daniel peeked from behind her, whispering, "Who is that?" Laura whispered back, "Family we haven't seen in years." Clark's eyes held regret, and though his voice was steady, Laura sensed unspoken truths. She crossed her arms, asking coldly, "Why now?" Clark sighed, "Because I know what he's capable of, and you shouldn't fight alone." The words unsettled her. Part of her longed for support, yet part of her recoiled, knowing help often came with a price. They sat around the kitchen table, silence stretching as Clark revealed secrets Laura never wanted to hear. Clark said softly, "Jason isn't just fighting for Daniel out of anger. He's being pushed by someone else." Laura's face paled, her hand trembling against the table. She whispered, "You knew, and you stayed silent all these years." Clark lowered his eyes, guilt carving deep lines across his expression. Daniel sat quietly with his toy, unaware of the storm circling his future. The kitchen air felt thick, each word adding weight to the betrayal. Laura thought fiercely, even family carries daggers behind their backs. Yet as Clark continued, she felt torn. His words were painful, but they could hold the key to surviving Jason's relentless fight. Later that evening, Laura stepped onto the balcony, Clark following behind. The city stretched endlessly before them, glowing under restless clouds. Laura whispered, "I can't trust you. You left when we needed you most." Clark's voice cracked as he replied, "And I regret it every day, but I'm here now." Laura's eyes burned with unshed tears, her reflection in the glass revealing both fury and fear. Clark reached for her shoulder, but she stepped back, whispering, "Daniel can't pay for my mistakes or yours." The silence between them carried years of wounds. The wind howled through the night, heavy with unspoken truths. For the first time, Laura considered that Clark's help might be real, but trusting him meant tearing open scars she had long buried. The next day, Clark accompanied Laura to meet lawyer Richard. Richard raised an eyebrow, saying, "I didn't know you had family support." Laura replied cautiously, "Neither did I." Jason sat across the table, his glare sharp enough to cut steel. Clark leaned forward, voice calm but firm. "We know what you're doing, Jason, and it won't work." Jason smirked, his silence louder than words, but his jaw tightened. Laura felt a strange strength standing beside Clark, though her heart still wrestled with doubt. For the first time, Jason's confidence wavered, and that flicker gave Laura hope. Yet she knew alliances built on broken pasts could fracture at any moment, and the cost of trust might still break her. That night, Laura tucked Daniel into bed, his small hand gripping hers tightly. "Mom, are we safe?" Daniel whispered. Laura forced a gentle smile, saying, "Yes, Daniel, we're safe." Yet her heart trembled with uncertainty. She stepped into the hallway, where Clark waited silently, shadows deepening around him. Laura looked at him and said quietly, "If you hurt us again, I won't forgive you." Clark nodded solemnly, replying, "You won't have to. I'm here for you both." For the first time, Laura allowed a flicker of trust to slip past her defenses. The night was still, heavy with unresolved truths, but the fragile bond forming could either save her or destroy her. She prayed silently for strength, knowing the real storm was yet to come. The courtroom was heavy with silence as Laura took her seat. Jason leaned forward, his eyes sharp with triumph. His lawyer spread papers across the table like weapons. Judge Richard adjusted his glasses, declaring, "We begin with testimonies." Laura's pulse hammered, but she steadied her breath. Clark sat behind her, his silent presence reminding her she wasn't fully alone. Jason's smirk unsettled her, but Laura pressed her palms flat, whispering to herself, "This is for Daniel." As Jason's lawyer launched into accusations, each word tried to paint Laura as unfit, erasing her years of sacrifice. She lifted her chin, swallowing fear, knowing her voice would soon be her only defense. The trial had begun, and with it, the battle for Daniel's future. Jason's lawyer stood, voice sharp as steel. "Laura has struggled to provide stability," he said, waving papers filled with twisted truths. Jason sat proudly, his silence a performance of control. Laura gripped her notes, forcing her hands to stop shaking. She whispered, "They don't know my nights of sacrifice." Judge Richard observed quietly, his stern gaze unreadable. Clark leaned forward, whispering encouragement from behind, his words drowned by the echo of accusation. Laura looked toward Daniel's small drawing tucked in her folder, reminding her of what mattered most. Every insult cut deeper, but with each strike, her resolve grew. She thought fiercely, "You can tear me apart, but you won't touch him." When her turn came, Laura rose slowly, her voice trembling at first. "I've worked double shifts to provide, I've sacrificed everything for Daniel," she said. Jason rolled his eyes, but Judge Richard leaned closer. Laura continued, her voice strengthening with every word. She spoke of nights holding Daniel through fevers, of mornings spent walking him to school in the rain. Her hands shook, but her eyes never wavered. Clark's gaze steadied her from behind, silent encouragement. Jason muttered under his breath, but his words failed to shake her now. Laura's voice rose with conviction. "I may not be perfect, but my son knows he is loved, and no lie can erase that." The courtroom fell silent, her truth hanging heavy in the air. Jason was called to testify, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I only want what's best for Daniel," he said, pretending concern. Laura clenched her fists as Jason's lies filled the room. Clark whispered sharply, "He's twisting it all." Laura's lawyer pressed him, asking, "Where were you during Daniel's early years?" Jason faltered, eyes darting before masking it with charm. Judge Richard's brow furrowed, sensing cracks in his story. Laura felt both rage and triumph as Jason's facade began to slip. She thought, truth always finds a way to surface. Daniel's absence in the room weighed heavily, but his presence was felt in every word spoken. The trial was no longer just evidence, it was truth clawing its way free. The climax struck as Laura was recalled for closing words. She held Daniel's drawing in her hand, her voice steady. "This is why I fight," she said, holding it up. Jason scoffed, but the courtroom leaned in. "Daniel deserves safety, love, and truth," she continued, her tears unhidden now. "I will endure every wound if it means protecting him." Clark's eyes shone with pride, while Jason's face twisted with frustration. Judge Richard tapped his pen, expression unreadable but focused. Laura's body trembled, not from weakness but from the release of years of pain. She whispered one final vow into the silence. "He is my world, and I will not let him be broken." The room held its breath, the verdict hanging close. Judge Richard's gavel struck, the sound echoing through the courtroom. His voice carried weight. "Custody is awarded to Laura." Laura closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks, relief and sorrow intertwined. Jason's face twisted with fury, his fists clenched on the table. Clark exhaled heavily, his shoulders finally releasing tension. Laura whispered to herself, "We made it, Daniel." The courtroom was filled with silence, broken only by the shuffle of papers. Judge Richard's expression remained stern, but his words had shifted Laura's world forever. She felt both victorious and scarred, knowing the fight had left wounds not easily healed. Her heart whispered a vow. Daniel's safety was worth every battle, every tear, every sacrifice. Outside the courthouse, Laura held Daniel close as cameras flashed around them. Daniel asked softly, "Does this mean we're okay now?" Laura kissed his forehead, whispering, "Yes, we're safe." Jason stormed past, muttering bitter words, but Laura no longer flinched. Clark stood nearby, protective but silent, watching Jason disappear into the crowd. Reporters shouted questions, their voices eager, but Laura ignored them all. The world's noise faded against the warmth of Daniel's small arms around her neck. For the first time in years, she felt the possibility of peace. Her heart whispered, safety had a cost, but love had carried her through the fire. She looked at Daniel's smile and thought, this is worth everything. That evening, Laura sat with Clark at the kitchen table. The apartment still bore scars of struggle, but the silence felt different now. Clark said quietly, "You were stronger than anyone knew." Laura nodded, her voice steady. "I had no choice." Daniel played on the floor, his laughter filling the space once heavy with despair. For a moment, Laura allowed herself to breathe deeply. She looked at Clark and said, "If you truly mean to stay, then prove it through action." Clark lowered his gaze, nodding with sincerity. The bonds of family were fragile, but perhaps not beyond repair. Laura's chest felt lighter, though she knew healing would take time. Hope flickered, small but alive. Later, Laura watched Daniel sleeping peacefully. She brushed his hair back gently, whispering, "We'll be okay now." The room glowed softly under the bedside lamp, the walls once heavy with fear now carrying warmth. She thought of Jason's rage, Emma's betrayal, Clark's return, each piece of her story carved into her heart. But here, in Daniel's quiet breaths, she found redemption. She kissed his forehead and lingered, letting herself cry softly, not from weakness but release. Her tears marked survival, proof that she had endured. She whispered into the silence, "You are my world, Daniel. We are stronger now." In that moment, the past lost its grip, and the future felt fragile but possible. Laura stood at the kitchen window, night wrapping the city in quiet stillness. She placed her hand on the door to Daniel's room, whispering, "We're stronger now, and we'll never stop fighting." Her reflection in the glass showed a woman scarred but unbroken. The refrigerator hummed softly, the apartment finally at peace. She smiled. A real smile, not the mask she had worn for years. Clark sat silently on the couch, giving her space, his presence steady but unobtrusive. Laura closed her eyes, breathing deeply, allowing hope to fill the silence. The battles had left wounds, but love had given her victory. Tomorrow was uncertain, but tonight, Laura knew one truth. She and Daniel had survived, and they would endure.